way last and is subordinated to the first lender.
We'll talk about subordination and all that. Carol, you had a question?
Yes, and the idea of parking money is one thing, but there's another trend afoot globally, and that's China acquiring agricultural land internationally. I'm talking about South America and on the African continent. And it's a strategic move. One, it's income producing food for their very large, huge population. And there's also this influence as the pendulum swings and America becomes less influential globally. As an emerging economy, China is asserting itself globally and taking up positions that colonial countries usually do. So this new style of imperialism, there is a strategy that is really effective, and it's making an inroad.
I was going to say, do you really think the Chinese government cares about feeding their people? Because that's where you started. I don't think they care. But yeah, I think right. So what those who don't study history are doomed to repeat the same mistakes, right? Unfortunately, every major civilization and every major power through history has demonstrated that it will implode, right? There's a lot of telltale signs about that, and you know, without being overly pessimistic, you know, we're living that in this country. So this is a country that had its time, and you know, it may survive in its form and shape for some while, but you know, it's definitely losing its influence. It's losing its power. Listen, you've seen, I think Europe is a good example. You know, there are huge powers, right? Huge wealth accumulations, and then people ultimately get comfortable and lazy. You know, at the end of the day, why do immigrants in this country tend to do better than local born people? Because they're hungrier. At the end of the day, when you're hungry, you work harder. I look at the Syrian and Afghani and Iraqi immigrants that are, you know, toiling through Europe trying to get to Germany, and you see the frustration, but you see the look of hunger in their face, and that's what drives ultimately, you know, human ingenuity. Unfortunately, if it's pushed, it can also create a lot of other, you know, conflicts as well. I'm not into all these like Nostradamus type people and all that, but there's some people that interpret some writings out there that say that ultimately, you know, the yellow man will rule the world or something. You know, at the end of the world, you know, the Chinese will rule. I don't know if that's true or not. But what I can tell you is true is they have a huge trading surplus. Huge. There are a lot of reasons for that. In addition to being industrious, they also violate intellectual property rights. They exploit workers. They restrict civil liberties. You know, except they manipulate their currency.
I was just gonna
you know, they do cyber, cyber terrorism, blah 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 blah. But in addition to all of that, they generate significant sums of money. And if you were to say from a sovereign wealth perspective, they are the single largest investors in the world today. And so, being astute, if you want to say that, being strategic, being opportunistic, being colonialistic, whatever you want to say, they're definitely going to the lesser economies in the world that need cash, and that's how they're trying to exert their influence and buy their way into, you know, into places. And so, you know, I don't know how that contrasts with what I read yesterday. It says that the Chinese government now is prohibiting their 88 million. There's 1.5 billion people, but there's 88 million members of the party. So you've got a privileged, you know, less than 1% of the population with the wealth, but they're not going to be prohibited from playing golf because it leads to sexual excesses and vices like drinking and things like that. It's one of the Western evils. I don't know if I believe that, you know. So it's kind of like your Saudi investors. I don't know how. But yeah, but there is no doubt, and I don't have any today because there haven't been any recent ones. But there's no doubt that once upon a time, I remember in the 80s, the Japanese economy, probably for more industrious reasons than other ones, was generating significant you know, trade balance. And they became huge investors in American real estate. In New York City, I don't know if it was Lenox Hill, but it was in Manhattan, you know. They bought Rockefeller Center and places like that, and in Hawaii. And they ultimately lost significant sums of money because they bought without regard to return, and they ultimately had to pay the piper at some point, you know. So, but the Chinese have also become big investors in American businesses. They have become big investors in American insurance companies, which provide a lot of capital into real estate, and are starting to delve directly into American real estate. So when we buy at Walmart, that's what we're doing, right? That's what we're doing. So, you guys having fun yet? No.
Yes.
Oh, you like it? You like it? Is this like? It's okay? No? Maybe? You like it so far? Okay, we're gonna have a test now.
On what, Chinese?
Chinese?
I talk about everything in this class with finance. No, I didn't. I'm gonna run for president. No. I can't run for president. How can Ted Cruz run for president if he wasn't born in this country? I heard he was born in
Born
Canada.
of parents. He wasn't born here, but his parents.
His dad's Cuban. I don't really care. I don't want to run for president. Has anybody? You can do this with any president. Has anybody seen a picture of Obama today versus Obama like 6 years ago?
Oh, yeah.
He was like a young, good-looking guy. He looked like garbage now. It's like, what? Why do you want that job again? Can you explain? Why do I want this job?
Did you see the picture of Rusev, Kirchner, and Pablo Escobar sitting at the table?
No, I didn't see it.
Oh yeah, it was circulating. Dilma Rousseff, or the Kirchner's from Argentina. And
Oh,
Escobar were
okay.
all sitting at the
Sitting
table
down? Oh, gosh.
having a meal.
It's funny how bad people always find each other, right? No, it's true. It's true. I mean, it's like. I'm sorry. No, what's from? This is an old stupid disc from like when I used to coach youth football. Some guy sold me these like little cutoffs, and I don't really think I have any. And I never deleted it because I never like I formation. I mean, come on. But this one is. I think these are old playbooks I've got in there. I don't know. Whatever. Nothing like.
You guys know the playoffs?
No, we play. We no longer. We've opted out of. This is a trend. I digress for a second. We've opted out of district play. We are in a district with a school called Booker T. Washington.
Oh, God.
And we actually the last time we played them was 5 years ago, and we only lost 34-0. Surprisingly, we're only down 7-0 halfway through the second quarter. But no, the problem that's happened with youth sports is there's an incredible amount of recruiting going on. Like, so it used to be like you went to public school, you went to school in your district, right? So like the quarterback at Booker T last year lived in Homestead. So how does he get to Booker T? You know, I mean, and why would he want to go there? Because it's like, I mean, I've got a kid. I had a kid that got his mom yanked him and put him in Booker T and brought him back this year. I mean, it's a horrible school. I mean, walking. So we're playing in a league with primarily private schools and then some smaller public schools. We play with the schools in the Keys, Marathon, Coral Shores. Like last night, we're up here at Pinecrest, Calvary Christian, King's Academy, Benjamin School, Ransom.
Yeah.
Gulliver is not. No, Gulliver is still playing. Gulliver's in our district. They're still playing in our district, but they've talked about getting out. And they've got their 4 studs are gone this year. I don't know what's.
I haven't followed it.
American Heritage just gets players. They're not allowed to get scholarships, but they get.
Yeah, I mean, the problem. What's happened is.
Like I was part of that. That was bad.
I took over. I don't know why this takes so long. I was the head. I took over the soccer program at our school like 4 years ago. Brandon, I took over the soccer program at our school like 4 years ago, and I'm now an assistant because I brought a friend of mine who was the head soccer coach at American Heritage.
Oh, okay.
And the reason he left is, that, you know, he was an accountant, he used to work for me. That's, I mean, I've known him for, hired him when he got out of college 20 years ago, and we stayed, but he was, you know, they took him over to America. He last worked for me at Florida East Coast like 7 years ago, and when I left, he stayed there for a while, and then he left. He got a job at Heritage making more as a head soccer coach than I was paying him. Well, he wasn't a CPA, but he's an accountant, more than I was paying him. So I said, how does school pay for that? And he had like carte blanche. He had like 16 kids that were on, well, they had financial aid, right? Because you can't give them scholarships.
Yeah.
But eventually what happened is the pressure came, right? You know, the owner ultimately came and said, hey, you know, you got to work at summer camp, and all the money's mine. And the parents, they got to work at the school. And you know what? You don't have 15 scholarships. I got to support football now. And so he's like, forget that. So, but it's but at the end of the day, then you can't compete, right? Competition is when you go into a contest and you have an opportunity to compete, right, to win. If you go into a game and you're going to lose, that's not competition. I mean, that's insanity, right? That's masochism. You know, okay. Well, and that's all coaching. Well, so at the end of the day, that's look. At the end of the day, and this is, and I don't want to knock Gulliver. I know you went to Gulliver, but so Gulliver's got a football player who, and I know your kids went to Gulliver too, so but Gulliver's got 4 football players that are Division I committed football players. So one of them is academically ineligible. Under FHSAA rules, if you are academically ineligible at the beginning of a semester, you're ineligible for sports during that semester. So that means if you're not eligible on August 15th, the next time you can become eligible is in January. But somehow this kid, they're working to get him eligible before. No, I'm not blaming you, but
listen. I mean, if you're not eligible, that's a serious issue you got to deal with to begin with.
to begin with, exactly. And you know, so
I mean, they have like a little like sports program in Gulliver to handle that whole situation. Like it's a real.
yeah, it's called the Miller Campus, and they got like 100 athletes there. And it's like a special ed school.
That's where the golf team went too. Like every city.
For Heritage, they have that too. They have the academy.
Yeah, the academy. They have that. Yeah. So why are we competing with all these other schools? The reason we joined that league is because, you know, number one, unfortunately, there's a barrier to entry, and that's something that I struggle with, which is you got to pay tuition, right? So not everybody can pay tuition in a private school, so that already limits your pool. And I'm dealing with that because at the end of the day, everybody should have a right to study wherever they want, as I see it. But the other one is it's the academic standards, right? And so all these other schools hopefully adhere to it. So let's forget high school sports and all that stuff. Well, I'll every now and then go back to that. This is a presentation that I put together. And this is one of several other presentations that I will show in this class. I spent a fair amount of time when I prepped for this class putting this together. So it's original material, but it comes from a lot of other sources, and I'll try to cite them, okay? And ultimately what I'm trying to get to is to give you an example or an understanding of how the capital markets work in relation to real estate, how real estate works within the capital markets, right? And how real estate should be viewed as an investment vehicle, right? Because if it's a financial asset, it needs to be viewed as an investment vehicle. So what are the attributes that it has? What are the return profiles that it has? What are the risk profiles that it's subject to? And how should we play in it? And so at a very broad level, I start with what I call just a historical view on risk and reward relationships by major asset class. Now, today I want to talk about privately owned, private equity real estate. Okay, either next class or the one after, I will show you the same sort of view as it relates to the public markets, and then I'll contrast the two, so that you will see over a time series how privately owned real estate behaves in comparison to publicly owned real estate, and what the cost of that liquidity premium is. Okay? So how does that impact me, and what does that mean? And the most important thing that I want to highlight in this is this particular section here that says risk and reward. Because ultimately, we've been told since we were little, in order to assume a higher reward or return, we must also assume a higher risk, right? We know that, right? We want a bigger thrill, you know? We want to feel good, we jump out of an airplane. We do jumping, you know, jump out of a bridge with a bungee cord, right? Or we can just watch TV or play video games, you know, right? Different rush level, right? Different risk associated with it. Video game breaks, you buy another iPad. Bungee cord breaks, it was real, you know? Okay, so, all the source for this comes from NCREIF, the National Council, not Council, I didn't say, I said an association. National Council of Real Estate Investment Fiduciaries. Who's in NCREIF? Teachers, JP Morgan, Prudential Real Estate Investors, ING Clarion, all the guys that got all the money. So, if you want to play in development and you want to do large-scale projects, you got to know these guys. Now, it's a club. You got to belong to that club. And you and I can't just belong to that club, all right? But we can slowly get to know people, okay? They track 7,000 properties, $400 billion worth of value. Okay? They've been tracking this since 1978. They provide a certain level of information, which is what I use. They have a greater level of information, which is available to academics at a reasonable value, but since I'm not an academic, it would cost me like $25,000 a year. And, you know, so, but I think we've got enough, okay? They track information by geography, they track information by asset class, and they track information by investing style. And we'll define all of these things as we go along in the class. One of the other observations that I'll make is I won't do it today, is does geography matter? Today we'll take a look at does asset class matter, but does geography matter, and does investing style matter? And ultimately when we talk about investing style, we're talking about the risk we're willing to assume because of the return expectation associated with it. So this is all NCREIF data. First thing I want to take a look, since 1978 through December 31, 2014, on a national level for the 7,000 properties that they track, the mean return, annual return for real estate has been 9%. The standard deviation associated with that is 7.5%. Now what does that mean? What does standard deviation mean? I mean, I'm not a statistics teacher, but so when we talk about means, we're talking about, hold on, I brought like my own markers, which were good. I stole them from school, I mean I borrowed them from school yesterday. Okay, listen, so when we talk about mean, we're talking about a central tendency, right? The example I always use, so I mean, look, I'm not, you know, you can buy or not buy into, you know, the whole sort of normal distributions. You know, everybody always tries to, you know, like in school, the bell curve, right? You know, 5% is here, 5% is here, 10% is here, and 10%, and then in the middle is like the 80% or the 70%, right? We can buy into it or not buy into it, but at the end of the day, it helps us explain patterns. It helps us explain phenomena. And there is in fact something called mean reversion. Things ultimately revert back to their mean, right? There is a mean is a mathematical average, right? It's the sum, right? It's the sum of all of the observations divided by the number of observations. Everything has a mean. And if you don't believe it, we adhere to it every day, whether we want to believe it or not. I always ask the question, I got to go to Spain in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. What's the first thing I'm going to do? I already bought the ticket. What's the next thing I'm going to do? I want to go to weather.com and see what the weather is like in Spain in the middle of November. Because I got to know what to pack. Do I take a sweater? Do I take a jacket? Do I take an umbrella? Right? And so we ultimately, just intuitively, right, sort of relate to that. I sail once a year. I go with friends sailing once a year somewhere. What do? I go to Wind Guru and I look at the historical sail and wave patterns in the area where I'm sailing. Why? Just to get an idea or a sense of how rigorous, how challenging It might be, and whether to go or not, depending, you know, some of my friends' wives don't like rough seas, so we gotta find somewhere where, or a time of the year where there's less wind and calmer seas, right? So with investing, it's the same thing, right? So at the end of the day, if I were to look at something like this, what I can infer from this is that I should expect, if I were to invest in the totality of real estate in the United States, I should expect a return of 9% on my money every year. Pretty simple, right? Because at the end of the day, the past may not be a 100% indicator of what future performance is going to be, but it's the best thing we've got, right? It's the best thing we've got, and it really is a pretty good predictor. Now, what helps us determine how good a predictor that is the standard deviation. And the standard deviation is what? Is right? The distribution, the dispersion around that mean. So if my average, if the sum of all of my observations divided by the number of observations gives me 9%, right? What is this? What is the normal distribution thing? Roughly, in ballpark, you know, within 2 standard deviations of that mean, you're going to have what, 92% or 88% of all observations, right? So said here, right, 85% of the time you're going to get 9% or 24% or minus 6%. Right? Yep. Right? And if you kind of take a look, we're pretty much there. Now we had an aberration here, right? 2008, right? Horrible returns for that 2-year period. But most of the time, 80% of my observations are right here. Exactly where my standard deviation is telling. And ultimately, as investors, when we talk in finance, risk. Risk is what? Risk is not achieving our expected return. And what's our expected return? Our mean, right? So risk is the volatility or the distribution or the range that exists around our mean. And why is that? Because, and as investors, we typically are only concerned with downside risk, right? We may only be looking at one tail, right? If 1 year my return is 24%, we probably don't care, right? What do we care when it's minus 6, right? That's the one that's going to bother us because we don't want to lose money. We may be only really concerned with lower tail risk. But in real estate, as we'll find out, lenders are concerned with other risk as well. And things like call protection are put in because people need to worry, or people are short sellers, right? Maybe some people are expecting downward returns, and so anything to the upside is going to damage them. So we're really going to be concerned with anything that is going to deviate from our expected return. And why is that? Because if it's a long-term asset and I got to liquidate, and all of a sudden, if I bought in 2007 expecting a 9% return, and I came down 3 standard deviations from there and I got to sell, what am I going to do? I'm going to lose money. So volatility, deviation from the mean is what generates, or how we measure, risk in the financial realm. May not be a definition of risk, but it's how we measure it. Make sense? So we have an expectation, and risk is going to be the distribution that we have from that expectation. Clear? Questions? Now, the next implication, or the next question on what asked from this is that good? Is this good?
No.
No?
If you did an ETF, one with the inception.
If I did an ETF,
So
what's
if
an
you purchased
ETF?
ETFs at the inception of them, you would be up 13.2%. With 2013, you're looking at 36.4. 2014, 24.
Dude, this guy's like a machine. What ETF are you talking about with a 30% return?
Bull market.
A bull market.
Yeah. So if you just based it on indices, you would have been up significantly more than your 9%.
Okay, what index? Hold on, this is important, guys. What
Okay,
index?
So the composite, for example.
The composite. Which composite?
The Dow.
The Dow
the
Industrial.
top 30.
The Dow Industrial 30. Okay, so if I
So-
invested in the Dow Industrial 30 in this same time frame,
No, I was saying from 2000, I was saying 9% isn't a good return today, but I guess long term it would be good.
he's hedging now. I'm not telling you you're right or wrong, I'm just challenging you, you know?
It's been going up.
I'll tell you what, listen, I'll tell you, I'm 55 years old, okay? I'm, you know, where I'm at, I'll take 9% all day long. I'll take half of 9% all day long. Where can you get 9%? Go to the bank. How much does the bank give you today?
1%, half of it,
I don't think anybody goes to the bank for
Yeah.
money.
half.
Well, no, yeah, but see, what happens, how old are you, if I could ask? And I'm not,
32.
okay. So what happens as you mature is that there are stages in life, I'm living through this, okay? There are stages in life in which you work very hard to accumulate things, right? And to save, right? And then so that your job is to accumulate. And then you get to certain points in your life where your job is to preserve. And when you're preserving, your risk profile totally changes. Because you know what? What I work for, I don't want to lose. And that's my number one job, number one. Number two, where am I going to get a job? I'm an old man. You can start 3 careers and not get to my age. No, but that's the reality, right? And so your perspective totally changes. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because the real question that one needs to ask, the 2 questions that one needs to ask as it relates to, is that a good return? Oh, I got 9%, is that good? Question number 1, how long did it take you to get that return? What's the time horizon for that? That's number 1. Number 2, and probably the most important question is how much risk did you assume in order to get that return?
Number 3.
What's number 3?
Number 3 is relative to the other
Okay,
investment.
very good.
What is the performance?
Very,
What's
very
happening in the
good.
economy?
Very good. Very good. 1 second, so I'm going to get to that. And that's why when I ask the question, is that good or not, compared to what? And that's why we benchmark. We're always, you've heard me, those who had my class, why do we benchmark? We benchmark for 2 or 3 reasons. We benchmark 1 against our expectations. Did we perform in accordance to what we expected? We benchmark against past performance. Are we doing better or are we doing worse than what we did before? And perhaps third and most importantly is how am I doing in comparison to other people? And so when you talk about composites and ETFs, is 9% good or not? I don't know, because if your point is right, if during this time horizon I could have bought an ETF and gotten 36%, then I'm a fool.
No, you wouldn't be. It was
No,
like
no.
13.2, I think.
You
from
think?
The inception.
You think? Well,
I'm
why don't you
actually
stay
pretty-
tuned? Why don't you
I'm
stay
pretty
tuned?
sure.
You're pretty sure? No, don't pull out your phone. Don't pull out your phone. Stay tuned, because I got some news coming, okay? Okay, Chad.
So I guess when I look at 9%, I go back to what you've said is the baseline, right? 0 risk, a treasury, ultimately, you know. And
What is the historical return on U.S. Treasuries? And I don't. So we're going to get to a class and define why U.S. Treasuries are risk-free. But if U.S. Treasuries, just assume for right now, if U.S. Treasuries are risk-free, right? What is the long-term? What is the 100-year return on risk-free securities in this country?
Less than inflation almost.
Okay, stay tuned for another class, but you're both
But the-
wrong.
But the point
But
is
you're both
anything
wrong.
that beats that, in my opinion, is a good return. Because that's,
Okay, stay tuned, because I'm going to define another topic in a second, okay? Just stay tuned. Stay tuned. Okay, so real estate, privately owned real estate, long term, is 78. Dude, I was out of high school in 78, okay? I know you were like, you weren't in Lenox Hill or whatever at that point. Okay? I was out of high school, I was in college in 1978. I was in New York, I was in the Bronx, actually, to be precise, in 1978. That's a long time. It's a long time. Stop to think. I mean, compound 9%. Compound $1,000 at 9% over 37 years, you'd be filthy rich right now, okay? That's a nice return. right? Money doubles at 7% every 9 years or something
Tax
like that.
deferred.
In a private setting, potentially tax deferred or tax advantaged if held properly, okay? So now we got a base, okay, so how do specific asset classes perform, right? Because they're not all asset classes are the same, are they? So retail, 9.4%. Again, this is all privately owned. Retail seems to have a higher return profile and a lower risk component than the aggregate asset classes. So from a relative asset class perspective, historically, real estate has had higher returns and less volatility. Now, I don't know what the answer would be if we looked from 2000 on, because it does seem to be a heck of a lot more dispersed, okay? It may still have a higher overall return, but volatility is definitely, risk has definitely gone up, okay? I could probably do that for you if you want. Do you guys use like the standard deviation tools, the function tools? And Excel has phenomenal tools. That's why I recommend this book, man. This thing's, it's like, you can get a lot of stuff. I know it's stupid. I always bring football up. Like, first thing I do, like, we play Thursday. First thing I do, I pull out the roster, I download the roster from the other team. I get median height, median weight, max, min, and average. I want to know who I'm playing. No, you laugh. I want to know who I'm playing. And I do it all in Excel. Okay, that's why I brought it up. It's not because of football, it's just because I do it all in Excel. Who's the biggest guy? Who's the smallest guy? And what's the average, right? Yes, ma'am.
Question. On the retail side, is there any, or have you seen any study of, like you said, from, I don't know, 2008, 10, projecting in the next 10 years, because technology is being so disruptive to retail that the risk profile has increased tremendously. And I think that those low cap rates and the steady returns are not going to be there in 10 to 15 years.
Okay.
It's going to, retail's going
Yeah,
to be
to answer your question, I have not seen that. I personally shy away from forecasts, from published forecasts, because they're worth the paper they're printed on. Ultimately, do your own, right? So if you're really that curious about that, then you could take on the Retailing in America article here, and you tell me what you think is going to happen based upon empirical research that you do. First of all, you got to figure out what drives retail. Does employment drive retail? Does GDP drive retail? Does consumer spending drive retail? Right? And if it does, how does that affect rents? Does supply and demand affect it? And then try to draw your own conclusions and project to the future. I mean, I think intuitively, my challenge to you and all these papers is intuitively what you just said to me is right. But prove it, because what I just showed you doesn't seem to support it. I've been teaching this class 5 years, and it's still, over the long term, retail, at least privately held, still continues to have the highest return profile of the traditional asset classes with the lowest volatility. But what I read would point otherwise. So my challenge to you would be, come up with your own conclusion. Remember, I told you I'd give you questions in this class, not answers.
They're still building malls.
Yeah, they started to. They didn't for some time. But yeah, and Simon's been one of the highest performing REITs over the last 10 years. I started teaching this class. Simon is trading at 70-something bucks a share. Last time I looked, it was 150-something. It's probably higher than that now. Apartments. Lower return, that would be my sort of, you know, it's more of a core asset. We'll define core another day. Apartments, lower return. It's got a little bit more volatility than I would have thought.
Rising rents.
Sorry?
With rising rents.
Well,
I mean, it's been all across
yeah,
America.
but remember, so let me define a concept, which is, this is what's called holding period return.
I hope so.
HPR, holding period return. What's holding period return? Anybody know that?
It's the amount of time you hold your investment.
Well, so holding period return is actually a percentage, right? And holding period return is price at zero, right, plus any dividends, right, that you may have received during that one, right, divided by, price at one minus price at zero plus, right? Holding period return is your value at year one, right? So listen, hold on a second. Let me just do a mathematical. This is, by the way, we all know this intuitive. All of a sudden we put a formula and people go, no, I'm in a real estate program, man. I thought I only had to read chapters.
Does that say plus the?
Hold on. I'm going to do it over here on this side too. So, holding period return is price at the end of year one, right? Subtract price at the beginning minus price at the end plus any dividends or distributions that you may have had divided by price at the beginning. Let's do it intuitively. I owned an apartment building. It was worth $100 at the beginning of the year. I got $30 of distribution during the year. It's worth $105 at the end of the year, right? So I've got 105 minus 100, right? So that's 5 plus 30 is, I've got 35 over 100. I have a 35% return that year. So holding period return involves both capital appreciation plus distributions. And that's the way all investments are. I buy stock. What's my return for the year? What it increased in value plus any dividends that I would have gotten. I'm a real estate investor. What was my return for the year? It was worth X at the beginning of the year. It's now worth, hopefully, X plus, not X minus, plus any dividends or distributions that I would have gotten out of the asset during the course of the year. Yeah, you guys are looking at me like,
That makes sense.
we didn't do this in we didn't do this in real estate finance.
That makes sense.
B0 is
Price at 0 point, right? Initial. Does that make sense?
It's return on your equity.
It's, yeah. So, but that's so to your point. So rising rents may have a. So here's another one here's another hypothetical one, right? So how much of what component of return, right, is based on current income, and how much of it is capital appreciation, and how much of it should be current income, and how much should be capital appreciation? And that's a question that we'll answer when we talk about styles of investing, because depending upon what you're looking for, there are people that are going to be looking for cash now. I need to pay my rent. I don't have a job. I need current income. You're 32. You need capital appreciation. You can buy Amazon too, or whatever it's good, Alphabet or whatever it's called, because you want your payday 20 years from now. I can't pay my rent with what Nova pays me, because what you pay Nova has nothing to do with what I pay.
Don't you have to just hold over 12 months so you avoid the 35% and you run 18?
Well, you're talking about taxes, man. I meant to correct Emmanuel. Taxes are not a reason to make an investment decision. Taxes are a consideration in structuring business decisions. Because the first implication of paying taxes is what?
You made money.
You made money. So that's a good thing. And taxes are a fact of life in most countries. Most countries at work, right? I used to tell people, I used to do work in Brazil, and the discussion was, the saying was, people pretend to pay taxes and the government pretends to provide services. So if you want to live in a place that provides services, unfortunately, you gotta feed the machines somehow, okay? So taxes, so you're talking about whether do you get a preferential capital gains tax rate on something after holding it a year, and what I'm talking about is just calculating what your return is during a 1-year period. By the way, I'm saying a year, holding period return could be 10 years, it could be 1 month. You could do this over, we could talk about monthly returns, okay? In fact, some of the data that I accumulate that I show, because the data I get is monthly, I gotta calculate returns monthly and then annualize them. So, holding period returns can be calculated over any period, right? You can say, hey, I made 8%. Well, over what period? Oh, over eight years. Is that good? Well, that kind of works back to a very low return, right? I made 8% in a month. Wow, now you're a loan shark. Now you're making money, right? Now that's like real money. I'll blow through some of these kind of relatively quickly. Industrial for me actually, industrial's another sort of core class, and curiously it has a relatively high return, component associated with it. And then office to me intuitively would be one of the lower ones, because office, I love office. And there's an asset class that I like, it's suburban office, but it's probably the one that also has the most risk associated with it. And the one that, you could really lose the most money on at the end of the day. Hotels. Hotels are horrible. I mean, with all due respect, they're like the worst, They're the lowest return and the highest risk. And that's just, they're very high. First of all, they're operating businesses, so they're not just real estate. They are also operating businesses, which have a whole other sort of risk component associated with it. But more important than that, they are also very, tied to economic activity and business cycles. Business cycles go down, people don't travel, people don't stay in hotels, rates go down, room nights go down, returns go out the window. Now, this is what I found most curious. Look at Timberlands over the same period. 12% return. And more important than that, very few negative years. Now, specialized asset class, very institutionalized. There are 4 or 5 REITs that you can own that own timberlands, but most timberlands are privately owned. So, unless you got huge money and you can buy significant holdings, as individuals, we can't play in it. It's also a very long life, very long life. Friends I stay with in Spain, his father-in-law, with one of his brother-in-laws, bought some oak farm, so land to plant oaks in Argentina, and this was like a 40-year investment for them, because you got to plant it, and then until you can harvest it, and there's a lot of risk associated with it. Rain amounts impact the growth, which impact the timing of the cash flow. A whole other business in real estate. I don't know anything about it, but look at the historical returns associated with it. Not bad, huh? Look at this one, farmland. Look at the return, no negative years. Look at the risk associated with it. Now, why do you think that is? Look at this. I don't know the answer specifically, but what I could surmise. What was happening here, 2000 to 2007? No, let's think what was happening with home building in this country.
There's no money, no banking.
No, this is all going up. Everybody was selling their farmland. Boom. Tyler, who'd you buy all your development land from in Naples or Bonita Springs or whatever?
It's a ranch. It's a ranch. Literally, there's cowboys out there still.
So there was a tremendous amount of conversion from farmland, well, primarily residential use, and so that's kind of become the frontier as municipalities expand. Farmland gets converted to other uses, generally to higher return, and that's why you've seen that. Look at the drop. And curiously, with all that, one of the articles that one of you will be challenged to deal with is there a bubble in farmland values now? Because, it's sort of what happens. How do economic cycles go? People don't know about something, somebody takes a risk, makes a lot of money. People see that they make a lot of money, so then everybody copies it. What do? They bid stuff up. What happens to the last guy? What happens to the guy that bought the condo on Brickell in 2007? He blew up, right? He blew up. And so that's just the way things work. Now, I want to show you a couple of things.
I didn't know. I'm way up there.
So, this is hard to read. This is hard to read. I just tried the period for which I had data that was common, which was from 92 to 2014. I just kind of put them to see, because when you overlay different asset classes, you start getting different perspectives on, well, maybe, do they all correspond to the same economic cycle? Are some leading indicators? Are some trailing indicators? Right? Now, you may not have definitive answers from this, but this starts helping you solve the puzzle, right? So, for example, you see that timberland was going down around 2005, 2006 severely. I have no reason, I don't know why. I have I don't know. While everything else was going up. Because there was a lot of home building going on, but for some reason, they went down. So that would be something you'd want to investigate, right? Now you see some things here, like for example, retail doesn't have the big dip that all the other asset classes had. And curiously, when I first started teaching here in the program, one of the things one of the case studies that we do in the accounting class is we take a look at supplemental financial reports that REITs put out. And I always use Simon, because you've got great financial reporting. And if you take a look at Simon in 2008, 2009, their occupancy, even though the economy is in a shitter, their occupancy stayed up high, because if you're a retailer, can you close? If you're a national retailer, can you close? Of course not, right? And more important than that, because in retailing, you tend to have very long leases. When they expire, at the rollover, you've got huge positive leasing spread. So leases that were expiring from the 1980s here, even though the tenants had a little bit of leverage, rents had gone up significantly over inflation amounts. So they were still replacing rents at higher levels than what they were expiring at. And so maybe that's one reason to explain it. You take a look at blue and you say, hey, industrial lagged all the other asset classes. That makes sense. Multifamily blew up first, industrial followed, right? You had a question, Carol.
No, a question. I was thinking that in retail, people will subsidize their disposable income by using credit cards and so forth. And maybe that explains.
Well, right, but that presupposes also that employment, for example, does not impact retailing, right? So employment doesn't impact rents. That's a relationship that one can draw. You may be right, but that would be something that I would challenge somebody to prove. There is again, I'm not an economist, but if you take a look, there's some curve that one of the reasons I'm incredibly conservative from a fiscal perspective, right? But I try to be fair, right? So most conservatives in this country, most people that call themselves conservatives or are conservative parties talk about a flat tax. And while a flat tax would definitely be a lot easier to deal with, it punishes the lower income people. Why? Because if you take a look at, at a curve like this, there's a certain level of basic needs that we all need to cover, right? Regardless of what our disposable income is. If we make more, we don't eat more. If we make more, we don't necessarily dress more. Now, we may spend a little bit more, but the purpose of this curve from an economics perspective is that everybody has a certain basic spending level that you need to meet regardless of the amount of money that you make, whether you make more or you make less. And your point is, if you make less, you just use credit cards. It's probably true. A lot of people do that. You do what you have to do, right? But this argument also says that if you make more, right, you don't have to spend more. Now, maybe some people do, but you don't have to spend more. And so from that perspective, you may be right. There may be a certain inelasticity associated with retailing because we all have certain basic needs, and there's a certain amount of retailing that has food and clothing that we need to buy regardless of how the economy is doing overall. Okay? So, I mean, you could get into like sort of correlation analysis between if you're trying to manage a portfolio and you're trying to look for optimal, so that's another one, modern portfolio theory in real estate. It's one of the other articles that one you could tackle. You know, how do I allocate my money? And does diversification matter or work as it relates to geography or as it relates to asset classes? I don't know.
Global warming is real.
Global warming is real. Okay? All right. I know what's real. I don't know about global warming.
No, it's like if it is, then diversification.
Yeah, I don't know if this thing
Pretty
doesn't.
important.
This computer is like foobar. So I'm gonna have to do it here.
It's actually called climate change.
Okay, so if we were to take a look from 1978 to 2014, this S&P 500, which we define as the market, it is not the broadest base of the equity market, but is what we use as a de facto definition of market in this country, because it is a relatively broad pool of equities in this country. The S&P 500 over the last 37 years has returned 8.2%. Privately owned real estate has returned 9%. For that 8% return, the S&P 500 has required you to incur a 15.6% standard deviation, or level of risk, as opposed to 7.5% for real estate. So, one of the other articles, why real estate? Why should real estate form part of your investment portfolio? And just from looking at this prima facie, I would say because it's going to increase your return and reduce your risk. And if it does so individually, when you then build it into a portfolio, it should hopefully help enhance it even more. So, contrary to popular belief, real estate, at least over the last 37 years, appears to have had a much higher return than the market.
Sir, for the purpose of our research paper, the way you cited the source of where you got the raw data from, you acknowledge it there, and then you do the extrapolation and all the tables and so forth, that's appropriate for you?
Well, I mean, I haven't really shown you any documents. So from a bibliography perspective, you could follow MLA, or you could follow APA, you could follow whatever. But look, I'm looking for you to learn, and I'm looking for information that I can show you. I brought, maybe it's in here.
But sir, what I'm saying is, take for example, if I use REEs or something, if I'm getting my raw material, my raw data from one central source, and I cite that this is a source, and I take things from table and make up different things.
Yeah, that's good
Say
enough.
this is where it's.
Yeah, that's good enough for me.
Okay.
That's good enough for me. Hold on. I thought I brought like one that a student had done, but I have to look for it. Okay. So one way to take a look at this, if you're trying to compare, we can look at that chart we looked at. But a very simple measure that people use is the coefficient of variation. And the coefficient of variation, what it does is it basically places mean over standard deviation. And kind of thinking of, you say, okay, for every unit of return, how many units of risk did I have to assume? And so, obviously, the lower the coefficient of variation, the better the risk-return, sort of trade-off, right? And so, if we were to sort of categorize them, if you bought farmland back in 1978 or whatever, you've got this 0.55, you've got a very nice relationship between return and risk, as opposed to taking a look at the S&P 500, which has 1.9. So, in the absolute, what does that mean? It just means it's a lot riskier, okay? There's no sort, it's not like a body temperature that, 98.6 is good or bad. This is just a relative scale. Now, this is an easy way to do it. We teach this in finance. in probably the real world and in more applied finance, people talk more about the Sharpe ratio. And it's Sharpe with an E, not with a, so it's Sharpe
What about the
ratio.
VIX?
Sorry?
What about the VIX?
The VIX, dude. I'll talk to you about the VIX in a second. Okay, people talk about Sharpe ratio, and the Sharpe ratio is essentially the risk that you're assuming over what's called excess returns. And excess returns would be what excess returns are you making over risk-free. And that's what you were saying before. So people would use a baseline for the calculation of the Sharpe ratio. You would use a baseline of the risk-free return and say, what excess return did you get over risk-free and what risk did you assume to get that? Because the assumption under the Sharpe ratio is you shouldn't assume any risk if you don't get an excess return. So you're already saying under the Sharpe concept, hey, how much more did I get than, for assuming risk than I would have gotten for not assuming risk? You don't need to memorize a calculation of it, but you might hear a lot of funds talk about in their prospectus what their Sharpe ratio is. The VIX.
Wait, so you said the Sharpe ratio is the excess return over risk free?
No. It's so the Sharpe ratio is a measure of risk that is assumed on excess returns. Excess returns being defined as returns over risk-free return. Okay, so if you got 9% and the risk-free was 6, then the assumption is that ratio, that Sharpe ratio calculation is going to be based on the 3% excess return that you got. Okay? But again, I'm just saying, people do not usually quote in financial prospectuses the coefficient of variation. They'll quote the Sharpe ratio. And the Sharpe ratio doesn't take mean or overall return. They take excess returns. So they'll subtract risk-free from this, basically. Okay? VIX. Okay, I'll get into a little bit more detail if you want later on. The VIX is a measure of volatility, and it's a measure of volatility that is based upon the implied level of volatility in expiring options contracts at the Chicago Board of Exchange. Okay? And the problem is we got to get into what's an option, what's a derivative, and how do you value an option, and what components. So there are 6 components to valuing an option, or theoretical components, and one of those components is volatility. And what this measures is implied volatility. If you know all the other factors, what is the implication of this? Okay? And it's all very theoretical. It's all very theoretical. It's a financial instrument that can drive you crazy. People ultimately use the VIX. I want to get into a concept later on called the efficient market theory. But the implication of using a market return or an implied market volatility is that the market knows everything. And so if volatility is already priced at a certain level into options, it must mean that the market knows the risk that's coming, which must mean that the market knows everything. And we'll talk about that later on today. It may be true, it may not be true, but that's the way people talk.
Sir, the guy who developed the VIX formula,
Yes.
he was being interviewed, and they asked him to apply that to the Chinese market and what was happening, and specifically with the exchange rate, with the price and so forth. And he was saying it goes beyond, it's defining. So that he said the Chinese market confound even his VIX formula.
Really? Well, there's been a lot of I don't know what's in as much as, and I don't really follow China. There's enough in this country to keep me busy. No. But I also understand. But I understand that like people that want their kids to learn Mandarin or Cantonese and whatever. But there's been a lot of in as much as they've been very industrious and have huge surpluses. There's been a lot of excesses, there's been a lot of manipulation in markets like the real estate markets. And there's a guy, There's a big short player out there called, and we'll talk about shorts in a little bit, called Jim Chanis. And he's been a huge bear on real estate in China for several years. Now, what happens with bears and with short sellers is sometimes it takes time for their predictions to come true, but he's been on this China bubble for, years. And it all seems to be coming to bear. There's been cities that have been built in China that aren't built, that aren't populated. It's all this real estate that's there. You see, it's just like they're ghost towns, So another way to sort of, so I graphed, right? But another way, so these are all tools that you guys can use, not only for your case studies, but more importantly for your life. There's a lot of different graphical tools that you could use to help you understand a lot of data. So, we did the coefficient of variation. You could use a Sharpe ratio. You can also plot a mean variance grid. And what we take is annual returns and risk. And where we want to be is northwest, right? We want higher return and lower risk, right? If you take a look, if you guys remember the Markowitz and the modern portfolio theory, I don't know who's going to do that case study, or that individual case, but the efficient frontier kind of goes like this. And again, you want to be northwest. You want to have more return for less risk. And when you plot this, you see how, farmland sits way up there, right? For almost the same risk as retail, right? But a much higher return. And you see out here, the S&P doesn't have that higher return, and by far has a significantly higher risk component associated with it. Now, this for a particular period of time. It's specifically for privately owned real estate. And it's specifically for privately owned real estate that is owned by the large institutions. But it's what we have. It's information that's available, and it starts helping us form opinions, perspective, understandings, and expectations as to what we would want our real estate returns to look like going forward. Yep. Does that make sense? Yes, Christian.
You mean private owned real estate owned by banks, pretty much.
Institutions, pension plans, funds, asset managers, insurance companies. So you guys can go to the NACREEF website, nacreef.org, and you'll see a listing of their members. I got it somewhere, but it's teachers, Pru, MetLife, Northwestern, ING Clarion, JP Morgan Asset Management, blah, 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 blah. It's all the large institutional owners of real estate in this country. Okay? Why don't, I don't, is the food here?
Yeah.
Okay, but hold on. Hold on. Why don't we do this? Listen, I promise, the afternoon goes faster if we just work a little bit more. It will, I promise.
Sir, you've never let us out early one time in our entire class at the county.
Do you know, sir, Chad, I spoke with Dr. Forgy a couple days ago. I just checked in, look, I'm still alive, I'm showing up Saturday. And he said, oh, I've got to set up, he gave me all the details, and he said, so look, we don't, you don't have to stay till 4:30, you only need 7.5 contact hours. And I said, yeah, I go, yeah, I think I have less. And I thought after I hung up, I've been teaching here 7 years. I've never let a class go early. And it's my intention to always do it. It's my intention to always do it. But I'm giving you your money's worth. No, listen. No, listen. Listen. No. Let's assign. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the case study. And what I'll do is when I break you guys can go over there and write your names next to what you want. But I've got, listen, 2 or 3 people sent me emails, but that doesn't mean that. Yeah, I said noted. I think my exact words. I was more ecstatic. The problem is I answered you, I think, on my iPhone or something. The other people were like, more. So, what I want to be able to do is match talents and interests with cases and with subjects. Okay, to the point that we get the best possible mix. I've read all these articles. Some articles are not necessarily what you think they say, okay? And frankly, I may challenge some of you to take something that's more complex than what you want to take. Some articles are definitely easier. Some articles are more quantitative, some are less quantitative. And so from my perspective, what I've done in the past, right, if I got a guy, you know, in a class who's an architect, for example, you know, I'm thinking now, I may not give him the modern portfolio theory one, although I've had an architect do that one, you know. But, you know, maybe an engineer with more, you know, mathematical skills might be better suited for that. I don't know. But there's usually no conflicts, okay? There's usually no conflicts. Ultimately, we can kind of get to something. But let me tell you what the case study is. I sent you the general instructions, okay? But it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. I'm looking for a 1,500 word presentation. And I'd like academic citations. If I see Investopedia, if I see Wikipedia, cite it, you get an F. I'm telling you. No, I'm serious. I'm serious. I want references to academic journals that support your thought process. You can choose to agree or disagree with what the authors of the articles are writing. I don't care about the opinion. What I care about is the thought process and the methodology. One second. Some of the articles are very short, and have very little meat to them. And in that case, your work is to make a case out of the general premise that's being discussed. Some articles are very extensive, and you don't really need to do a lot more research beyond what's in the article. I will, for most of the articles, I've already got a list, because I've got some new ones I haven't made a list for yet. I'll send you a bunch of questions, you know. For example, you know, I'll take like, you know, there's one's called appraised value versus sales price. You know, because an appraisal should be a sales price, right? Well, maybe, but not really, right? Especially not in commercial, right? So, you know, what's an appraisal? Who's an appraiser? What ethical breaches may be noted in the appraisal process? So, if I pay an appraiser, is he independent? For example, I mean, I don't want to, I'm already giving, so what is, well, they all belong to the what? The MAI? What's that? Made as Instructed Institute, right? No, I mean, there's an implication. I mean, how can you be independent and provide, if I'm paying you to give me a price, right? I want you to address that. Maybe there isn't any issue, but, you know, what is the role of appraisals in the context to fair value and mark-to-market accounting? I mean, there's a whole bunch of different, what other measures of value or signals beside appraisals may be available? What implications may tax policies have on appraisals, right? You know, what is the impact of the breadth or the depth of a market on appraisal? What is the impact of rising prices, rapidly rising prices or falling prices on appraisals? Do appraisals lag or do they lead prices? Et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm looking for is not, oh, an appraiser is a guy that you hire when you buy a house and he gives you a paper and you take it to the bank and they loan you on it. No, I want an understanding of what that process is about, why is it undertaken, how does it validate, or how does it support the buy and sell decision, or the buy and sell process, okay? I mean, that's one example. Another one could be real estate and retailing, you know? What components of this return are in this asset class are current income versus capital appreciation? Are downtowns dead? Or are they being revitalized? Has Walmart or Amazon forever changed the face of retailing? Right? You know, what economic, demographic, or sociological demand factors drive this asset class? And I've had students in this class that will do correlation analysis between employment, household growth, GDP, consumption, to occupancy and rental rates, to see if you can draw some sort of comparison. So, what's going to drive ultimately the returns in this market? I've had some inconclusive data there. But you can do the same thing for office, right? You can do the same thing for industrial, etc. Okay? So that's what I'm looking for. With the number of students that we have, the presentations are going to be 10 to 12 minutes. So you're going to come up here, you can use a prompt. Hey, 10 to 12 minutes, you can't do more than 4 or 5 slides, max. Like an introductory one with your name and the name of the presentation. A couple of slides of me, right? Sorry? I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, she was locked out?
No,
Oh.
I was just pointing out that.
Oh, okay.
Easy to correct.
So you don't need to use you don't need to use PowerPoint. You don't need to use a prompt. I mean, you can stand up here and go, go solo. All right? But the whole purpose at the end is also to help get you, as in all the other classes, accustomed to making presentations, right? Conveying an idea and a message, and making sure that people understand it, right? I have a grid that I use to grade. Roughly half of it is oral and presentation. Half of it is writing. On your oral presence, right? Come well dressed, come well groomed. How compelling are you as a speaker? How do you articulate? How much enthusiasm do you have, right? Writing, I'm looking for writing. I'm looking for creativity. I'm looking for research. And I'm looking for compelling thoughts, right? Ultimately, are you supporting your ideas? Okay? So, that's basically it. I want to make this an interactive process. Now, what I mean by that is, and I was very clear on this, I'd like to get an outline before we start working. Doesn't have to be extensive, but I'd like to get an outline. It could be 1 page if you want it to be, but I'd like to know where you're going with it. Now, that may evolve, that may change as you work through your project. Hey, you think you're going to support a certain idea, and as you start researching, you find that you can't get there, or something else of more, comes along. So you do that, you follow that.
When do you need that? When do you need the
So
outline?
for example, if you're presenting next, in 2 Saturdays, and we're on the phone this Tuesday. We're on the phone this Tuesday. I would hope by Tuesday, I got like a little outline. So now you got like a week to work. An outline, it's not that difficult. So, and I need to get, and I'll do this tomorrow, I'll get the articles out to you tomorrow, okay? Some of the articles you can pull down from the journals, some of them I've scanned from a book that had a compendium of them. Some of these articles are very dated. The concept isn't. So the articles on, like, for instance, office, retailing, have dated information. But the question is the same. So your challenge in those articles is to update that information and validate whether the conclusions that the author is coming up with are valid or not. Okay?
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you providing questions that you want us to answer?
No, so the questions are to
Help us.
thought. You don't have to go through those questions. They may help you, they may not. You may choose to take a couple of them. You may choose to ignore them. Okay? I mean, my thinking would be picking a couple of those to embody would probably be a good idea. Probably make the instructor feel good. Like, are there any questions on the term paper? Okay, so
When is it due?
it's staggered. So we're gonna have like 7 people the first.
So the term paper is the case study.
Excuse me?
The term paper is the case study.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I thought there were 2 separate.
No, just one. So some people do the 7th, some people do the 21st, and some people do December 5th. And I'm telling you, I know sounding like, oh, I want to do one on December 5th is like, oh, that's far away, I can deal with it. I'm telling you, it's like better just get it done and over with, okay? What I've tried to do is group them. I didn't send this one out to you because I did it after I sent the email. I've tried to group them to more or less correlate with what our class sessions are going to have. Okay, so like in the last one, we go over securitizations. then that's the one where, you know, we've got, you know, private mortgage bankers, securitization, rating agencies, et cetera, so that there's some correlation between the reading material, the lecture material, and the presentation the students are going to make. What else can I tell you about this?
Just a minute, sir. I'm just looking at my calendar, and I have a ULI conference on the 10th, which is a conflict. So how does
Is that
that?
Friday?
On the 10th?
Yeah, that conference is from 8 until noon.
On November 10th?
Yes.
Give us the calendar.
No, that's an office call.
Okay, well, I mean, I can give you a couple of options. One, I just said we can communicate via email, or you can pick another topic as well that may not.
No. It's for your weekly, bi-weekly.
I understand that, but so you're not, so you don't need to be on the call. You can be if you choose to be. I mean, it's open. I'll send an invitation to all of you. You guys can dial in or not.
Okay.
If you don't have questions, or you don't feel the need, you don't have to. I mean, and really, and listen, I don't know any other instructor that does this. My experience last term was not positive. It was not positive.
I emailed you every time I couldn't make it, and I asked you.
I got all the emails after. Oh, I'm sorry I couldn't make. I'm sorry I couldn't make the call. Can you please post the video so I can look at
Well,
it?
the program in the
I
morning,
didn't
right?
ask for the video.
Yes. So I mean, we can just, but I mean, regardless, we can email you.
Of course. Yeah. So I'm just trying to give you, like, I wish that, like, I'll be candid with you. You know why I don't do nights? Because I come home destroyed after practice. I just can't. I start early in the day, and I can do mornings. I know everybody's got a different schedule. I know for some of you nights may be better, but I'm telling you, I come home physically wiped out. And so I mean, the thought of staying 2 hours, it's not even a mental issue. It's you know, I'm done. Yes, Christian.
The office hours is gonna be just for that group or the whole class? I mean, I don't.
There's no group. It's anybody can dial in. You know. So, you know, you got a midterm coming, and you know, and you got questions. Hey, call. It's just making myself available. Okay, you don't have to, but I do want to see an outline. And if you want to discuss the outline on a call, then you get on a call and discuss the outline. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, now this is what I'm going to do. So, I'm gonna put them in the back. Don't run.
Yeah, right there.
I'm gonna put them in the back. I'll put them in the back. You guys can start, you know, eating or whatever. I'm gonna leave. I gotta walk. You know, I gotta get some fresh air, whatever. And I'm gonna come back and we'll try to finalize this. Okay? I'll probably take a little break and eat at that point. Okay? And then you guys can eat now if you want. Yes, sir.
So does it mean whoever puts their name first, is that theirs?
No, it's not saying. Because then I'm going to go over this thing, and then, like, if there's conflicts, then I need to, you know, like, if 2 people are on one, and there's no name on one, I got to play Solomon.
Okay.
What about the ones that have been pre-selected? Have you made a note of those?
I've noted that.
So it's there.
No, I didn't note it here. I noted it on another paper.
Oh, okay. So somebody can take that today
Let's
then?
go.
Someone can write their name. No, I would encourage you. Claudius, I would encourage you to go put your name on it right now, but I have it. Hey, hold on.
That's what I did.
Oh wait, now round 2.
I know what I want. Is there a line? If I may. After you run.
I got that one.
Wait, where's the one that I just saw?
Write my name right there.
Hey, you're pushing
Tyler.
out of the way, man. What's going on?
K-I-T-S-O-N.
Move this one down!
Priorities.
Yeah, I got skipped by like 5 people over there.
Did any of you guys order tuna?
Keep in mind one more time.
Okay.
I'll let you use my pen if you write.
Anybody order tuna? Anyone get tuna?
I really didn't mean to call you out. I didn't mean to. I
I was like,
didn't think that loud. I didn't think I was being that loud, of course. 'Cause I never know which one.
There's one tune on the top.
Oh, the marketing of multi-media.
No, there is no tuna. Oh, there is no tuna. So no one has to. I just want to give whoever ordered the tuna is not being screwed.
Are these like all of them?
Just about to.
I was hoping that mine was protected.
There's broccoli cheddar.
Yeah, I was right, nobody wanted it.
Put these sandwiches in different brands all the time.
Mortgage. Determines the mortgage attorney.
This was a why real estate.
Yeah,
I'm kind of on a weird angle.
Yeah,
So I can't really
right up on that. Yeah, from
Mike, I'm kidding.
Doesn't look like an Italian at all.
This one is a why real estate. Yeah, why real estate.
Sorry.
It's like running into like it's like running into a burning building. Like everybody else is running off a cliff. Like I'm like, you don't even know what you're getting into. That's right. You know, I like to go to a trick doctor terminator, which is pick a number. Seems like you're enjoying this class.
Real estate about like
Now, I
It does seem kind of basic. I'm sure it's very
well, where's the question originally?
all the real estate
Okay, so
Really?
what the heck?
These two uniforms.
that final was tough. I saw those races. Assuming I should play red. Kind of iron.
Oh, so it's about to erase it.
I know, yeah, only just like 2 or 3 on the final. I think it's pretty high.
Yeah, the order security.
Securitization mortgage debt. Do that one.
Yeah, so we can do it.
You can put your name next to another one too, and you can choose.
Oh, okay.
It's something right here. It's just like investment sports where everyone just gets sit and grade. That was hilarious. That was the biggest crowd show I've ever seen in my entire life.
Dude, that investment course, I didn't know what was going on, man. I was trying to teach myself finance. Literally, as I'm taking an investment course, which finance is basically a foundation for money, right? Like, you're already supposed to know finance, and then we're going to build on it with investments. And I'm like, dude, I don't know finance, man. Like, so I'm like, I studied the book on that one harder than any other class that I've done. I mean, I kept rereading chapters because I was like, I don't understand this. Dang, people are using pen, huh?
Is it bring your own pen?
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe we should use pencil because you might not get what you want.
Yeah, no, I'm actually gonna come in here, Brandon, and I'm gonna steal retailing from you because I'm kind of in that thing. Or Timber, I'm gonna do one of these two. I don't want to do anything on this day.
I told you the guys that I work the outfit, their CEO used to work at Styles for like 7 years.
What was his name?
Kerry Goldberg.
Yeah, I never heard that.
He worked in your department, I think.
Development or realty?
Development of retail.
Yeah. Okay, then yeah, I'll ask Ryan about it.
I know he did not work in residential.
Property type, diversified versus specialized. None of these are great. These are all terrible. Nothing good is left.
What was the good to begin with?
I want to take the timber, because I actually know a lot about timber. And also,
Well, that's why you shouldn't take it, because you already know a lot about it.
well, that's why I want to take it.
You want to make it easy on yourself.
Well, because I'm interested in it, because there's a lot of, I have a buddy, there's a lot of...
Are you a private equity guy? Because it sounded like that was a pretty exclusive market from what he said. If you're getting 12% returns, and they're boxing it out, like, how do you get in there unless you have a relationship?
Yeah, can we all look at it? Because expedite it. Yeah.
They're wanting you to get out of the way.
That's fine. Cool up, there's not much left.
Ladies first, you guys go ahead.
Laura, you were here first. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just trying to pick up.
So everybody can see it? Yeah, let everybody look at it.
Is there a page 2?
What's this? No.
Yeah, there's not much left. You're right.
Are you interested in this?
Yeah.
You want this?
Yeah.
Okay, take it. Because if not, I'm going to
Put
take
your
it.
name on next to somebody else, right?
All right, so let me put my name here, I guess.
Yeah. You want to do something else.
Now I have to
You put slash.
I think mine's the...
Well, no, this is pulls up the
More than one, yeah.
So all the data.
They're Russian. Referee. That's the only other thing you go there. All the ones you got, probably change the. Well, that's good.
Which was yours?
That's one.
You're at 270.
Yeah, no one is. I'm at the bottom. I'm like the second to last person to go. What? I want to go like right away.
That stuff is selling at 3.
This quizzes were
Coming in, the anchor.
Gotta be that.
Which one are you leaning towards?
I wanted to go with the family. Pick this one too. Operating expenses, legal premiums, just in case.
When you choose it, you're saying when you're going to present. I just realized that.
I want to get it over.
It's on video. I know.
I got full circuit cameras watching you mug me. Then I realized the other day, you're like, oh. I don't think you know what happens?
Let me close this up. But you can actually do it for way less than 50%, right? What if you go for way less than 50%? We're at 65%. No, oh, I thought you were saying 50% equity. Correct? All right, I was gonna say because I'll finance you at 50% equity.
Oh, at 50% equity, I'll get 2 started. Yeah, 50% I'll get 2 started. But no, he's saying in pre-sold, we pre-sold.
What are you looking at?
I understand.
It should be like 20 million and then 35.
I also feel like it's kind of a little bit of a shell game.
They didn't give us or whatever.
I get some of
That's some calculated.
Alright, I'll probably live.
I'd rather just like, I know.
Well, we
That's my piece street.
Thank you. Thank you. An hour and a half.
That's what I'm doing.
So, they're just replicating in a way that.
Sometimes on a Thursday night, it's like.
So I wonder,
No.
if there's a bubble of
Thursday nights, better on the
because I don't know this is probably, but I
have
higher rates.
one lot that I'm looking at
Then the returns that
right
they
now.
get.
I'm looking at the profit.
Or they split it off, right?
I was freaking 5 to 10 years down the line. I
Ultimately, it's more risky because you have more investors that are partially liquid. So, if you don't perform, the rates are
It's like any other stock. If it doesn't perform, what happens?
Hey, you're taking the class next week, too?
You don't, private investors don't liquidate, you know, just because you have a bad year.
I kind of want to wild card for the top Massey for Halloween.
I don't know, I just, I'm looking at.
So am I, yeah, we're just keeping on the same weekend.
Talking about spinning off for
But like,
REE
it's
thing.
this first class.
I don't know.
That's the thing, I
It's
didn't
just-
see it.
Well, what it is that that's like more of a survey class.
It's crazy.
So like you can miss it because you can watch the video.
I mean, I don't think I'm ever gonna sit down and watch 8 hours.
No, you're not. It's good. I never watched it either. one day, I've been late one time. I set my alarm to pee instead of AM. So I got up like at 8:30, and like everyone's like freaking out. I'm like, guys, relax. And I'll be there. I got in like 11:30. Like,
There's this thing called klepto training where like people.
it's already late. They want.
I just want to see what time that game is. It's a noon game. I really don't want
Famous
12 o'clock kickoff.
I doubt we're going this season. You know, the better you are, the later on.
Yeah, but it's against the
It's our horror. It's like,
Is that our home, guys?
we'll have that like.
It's like you have that. Pretty sure
Yeah.
I
just posted on the other food.
Just gotta have it. That's right. There's no thought in
a bagel will do.
I brought in a Dr. Pepper and I put it in the ice. Did him choose?
I did, but
The ice over there. And I was like, I want to cool it down.
The market portfolio theory applied to real estate.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah. Where is it? Oh.
Or you have these two original securitization.
There also someone didn't choose.
Yeah, I don't know what I only put multi-family. I was like, okay, well, I guess I know that.
Yeah, I got it. A minus.
That's everything.
Tell you what.
Correct.
My dad didn't get him?
And I want somebody who
Or 4.
he wanted to buy one of my investment properties. And I let him negotiate that's all he probably.
No, I think it's
But they didn't come back. Like that guy, he's trying to come back and forth. It's not over here. The big one. He says, yeah, what?
Just too busy.
One pitched out in the middle of our group.
Yeah.
One was
He was not having that control.
he wasn't happy with us. Like I told you, one of the
They're not
reasons,
happy with
one of the
anyone.
reasons I quit my dad's stuff before because I can't. There are some ones that you learn over this. I have some short that we would like fight. I on our edges, but I just already know my main pressure that they don't want to see that or something.
Kyle,
We're like
did someone eat my sandwich or they don't bring that to the instructor?
You should
And
say
then
that.
open up an email
Factor,
and send it to
which
you.
I think it's really good. And then I tried that.
Yeah, it was like,
I'm expecting
Don't sweat it.
it's that, but like, that is not, like you sent me an email, and he was like, so this is what I need, this is what you guys need to send to him. First of all, everyone's gonna be their job, so I can put together everything. And, so then I was like, wait a second, why
Yeah, that's fine, I appreciate it.
You don't know what you're
Don't sweat it, man. Don't sweat it.
Yeah. And I was like, what are you talking about? You don't know what your scope of work is. Yeah. And then I like step back for a little bit.
Right.
I was like, there are 4 other guys in this group that will defend me like I am. I just like sat back. And he was like, I don't know what to do. I was like, I don't know what to do either.
Every perspective you look at it.
He said he didn't understand.
No, but when we sat here, it's like, I know financial, I'll do it as a
Do you have my stuff there?
It's a. Was it like in the top or the middle?
It doesn't matter. It's not his business.